All right. I'd like to welcome you to the first Rogue Credit Union Board orientation. There's been an increased interest in serving on the board and being of service to Rogue and to different candidates. And today we're going to provide you with the information necessary to assist you in the consideration to apply for a board position and the potential to be elected to a position of the board. I'm Jerry Houck. I'm the chair of the board at Rogue Credit Union. With us today is Gene Pelham, CEO, Tim George, board member, Philip Smith, a board member, and then we have a good Italian gal here, Shelley Obrimbowski. She's our internal auditor. Heather Johnson, and Polish. Oh, I thought the Polish offensive lineman, right? Heather Johnson, a member of our supervisory committee. We have a candidate here. It was Murray LaHue. Murray and Matt Stevenson, our executive vice president. Liz Selby, a member of our board, and Shay Loeb, our person that keeps track of everything and keeps us going.
Extraordinaire in the back. He manages everything.
Okay, today we're giving you a background of information, a history of credit unions, a history of Rogue, the basic requirements to apply, the role of a director, the liabilities, the expectations, the hours you're expected to have available to fulfill the responsibility of a Rogue board member, and hopefully to give you a better understanding of what is expected from you as a potential board member. Then we will have time at the end for questions. I myself, a little background history in myself. I've been a member of Rogue Credit Union since 1972. I've been on the board since 2002 and the board chair since 2008. When I joined the board, we were $220 million. Today, we're at $1.3 billion and growing. And I can say that during this time period, I took over as chair in 2008 during the economy not at its highest point. And this last period of time has been a tremendous sense of satisfaction, hard work, growth. And a lot of that is due to CEO Gene, Matt, and also our strong board and the attitude of the board, how we pull together and work together. The Federal Act, as far as the Federal Credit Union Act of Congress, was passed in 1934, and it was to create the ability to have, a nonprofit area where we could receive credit. This act was established and it created the Bureau of Federal Credit Unions, which now it has become the National Credit Union Association. The basis of this Federal Credit Union Act came from a 1909 Massachusetts Credit Union Act, which federally is used, and most of the states have assumed that, and their basis and their credit union acts are based on these abilities. Okay, the one thing that we like to talk about credit union is the fact that we have federal charters and state charters. I started out as a member of Rogue. It was the Jackson County Teachers Federal Credit Union. Then it became the Jackson Public Service Federal Credit Union, right, Chief? Employees Credit Union. And then it expanded beyond that, and now we are Rogue Credit Union. The name federal was dropped. The reason we went to the state charter was the federal, at the time we were federal, it did not allow us to expand our membership. We wanted to serve all of our members in Southern Oregon. We had a huge number of members in Roseburg, for example. We did not have the ability to expand there. As a state charter, we were allowed to go anywhere in the state or the areas where we chose to go into the state itself. And this allows us to serve our members in those areas in a much better way, and that's what the purpose of our credit union is, to take care of our members and serve our members. Okay, this time, I'd like to present to you our CEO, Gene Pelham. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the federal insurance. A lot of questions we've had when you would go from a federal to a state was, do you lose your federal insurance protection? No. None of that changed. We're still FDIC insured, $250,000 per account. We did not lose all that. Primarily, it was a name change and allowing us to cover a greater area. Now, Gene. I am? Okay. Do we have bylaws sitting over here if you'd like to buy the bylaws?
Okay. First of all, thanks, Murray, for allowing us to have an audience today as we do this. Whoops, sorry.
We are using the mic because we are recording this for
So your bylaws specifically state that there are two primary purposes for credit. One is to encourage thrift, encourage the savings that you have
as you go through life, and the second is to provide credit for provident and productive purposes. Some members think that it's just for low deposit rates or high deposit rates. That was a faux pas, wasn't it? High deposit rates and low loan rates, but actually it's to encourage thrift and provide credit. Our leadership's expectations of the board is to have a high-performing board. The board works very, very hard each and every day, making sure that they protect the credit union from all the unknowns that are out there. We just spent yesterday with Shelley's help in our supervisory committee meeting talking about all the technology risks that the credit union faces and the increased oversight on a regulatory level that we have as a credit union. The other part that's been incredibly powerful for this board is that they have spoken with one voice. I, as the CEO, don't have to answer to 7 different bosses. I answer to one boss, and that's the boss of the credit union board that speaks with one voice. They're unified in their focus and their direction of me as we go forward. I've been on boards where I had 7 bosses, and the credit union went 7 different ways depending upon who had the loudest voice at the time. So one voice is what's helped this credit union be incredibly successful. The other part is they are committed to ongoing development. The board of directors works very hard from the perspective of continually raising their knowledge and skills and understanding of what's happening in the financial services area. There are specific requirements for the board on education, and those we can answer those questions for you afterwards as we go forward. So for the credit union, the organizational structure, members are the owners. Murray, you're an owner. I'm an owner. Shelley's an owner. Everyone here is an owner of the credit union. And so therefore we have a right in the say in the way that the credit union's done. And the best way to describe that or depict that is by identifying members as the ultimate boss. The members are the ones who make the ultimate and final decisions. It's great that we have you here today, Murray. I would have loved to have had 100 members here today to learn about the possibility of board service. One of the things that we've seen is when organizations are really run well, the members are less engaged in the organization. Now, when it's not run very well, we'll get 100 people in here, but that's not going to happen under my watch or any of these members' watches. So the members then select a board of directors. That board of directors currently stands at 7 board members, and they then hire a CEO. And fortunately, they hired me back in January of 2007. But they also appoint a supervisory committee. You're sitting with Heather. Heather is on our supervisory committee. Shelley helps guide the supervisory committee, and they're basically the audit committee, or what we call the watchdogs of the credit union. They make sure that the board takes actions that are appropriate for the strategic and financial risks that lie ahead and meet the needs of the members as we go forward. Questions about that? Pretty basic, but it works. The members, the board, and ultimately the CEO. So I am the sole employee of the board. The board's not out instructing Matt or others on different actions, so we have multiple voices. They speak through me with their one voice and allows me to guide and run the credit union. So now let's talk about Rogue Credit Union. Some quick things to do that, and let's see, at I think about 12:30 I should be done. So if somebody will give me a heads up if I'm going too long. So let's talk about the credit union difference. Credit union difference. Credit unions are not for-profit financial cooperatives. And a lot of folks don't understand what a cooperative means. A cooperative is where people join together to help each other out. It's not for the interest of one, it's for the mutual benefit of many. And that's one of the things that has differentiated us in this marketplace as more and more institutions are focusing on creating bottom line profit. We're focusing on creating value for each and every member. So there are no stockholders, but there are shareholders. Everyone that does business with us invests in a $5 share, And that's how you purchase and become a member of the credit union. Fairly simple process. So everyone has an equal ownership. You can have $1 million or $5 or $25 is the minimum. And at $25, you have the same vote as someone with $1 million in the credit union. And that's what makes it a cooperative. Credit unions have always stood for the basics of not for profit, not for charity. Some of our members would like to give charity, especially on deposit rates, when deposit rates don't justify it right now. But they want it's not for charity, but it's for service. It's creating value and the ability to have a trusted place to put your money, to be able to meet your lifelong dreams, whether it's getting a new car or, as for Chief George, a new boat. We give Chief George a hard time because he's been turned down for a boat more times than how many? Yeah, and it's not because it's credit; it's because the MSR doesn't think he needs another boat. So that's see, we look out for our members too at the same time. But we've talked to Chief now, and we're going to have him, since he lives on the coast, we're going to have him get a commercial fishing boat and go out and might get approved for that one, right? Okay. So not for profit, not for charity, but for service. So this part is the part that is close to my heart. Is back in March of 2008. I became the CEO in January of 2007. And Matt was one of the first folks I hired here. And we started saying, what do we have to do to help the credit union come up with a clear, consistent vision for the future? A vision that not only would be good for tomorrow, but would be good for next year, would be good for 5 years, would be good for 10 years, 20 years, and so on. And so with that, we said we need a vision. It's got to be simple. It's got to be clear. It's got to be easy. And we were incredibly fortunate. We didn't realize how smart we were at the time. Let's knock on wood. Let's do this. Knock on wood. We didn't realize how incredibly smart we were at the time. But just in advance of the financial crisis, we chose loyalty as our strategy. Doing the things for our members that would make sure that they would be loyal to us as we went forward. Well, what happens during a financial crisis? People turn to their friends, their neighbors, their family members, their community, because they can't trust the major market institutions. And we saw that there was considerable lack of trust in the Goldman Sachs and the Lehman Brothers. Their failures caused folks to bring their money back home. And when you work with a strategy of being loyal to those members that bring their money back home, it worked out incredibly well. So we created the vision of the most loyal members in the nation. And if there's interest on your part on how we calculate that, we can explain that later. But there is a way that we measure ourselves against other credit unions around the country. And actually, we're one of the highest performing credit unions in the country in creating member loyalty, which is also an indicator of why we've been so strong financially over the last couple of years, is because of the loyalty that we create with our members. And we do that following a very simple filter. Every decision that we make, we ask ourselves 3 questions. Does it create and keep promoters? Does it make people want to tell others about the credit union as the place to put their money as they go forward? Does it drive good profits? There are a lot of ways to make profits, and most of those, or many of those, can be bad. But a way to make good profits is that you create profits that the member, or you, Murray, feel is good about the value you're receiving. The staff member feels good about offering it to you, and the credit union makes enough money off of it to continue operations and to pay the salaries of the folks that we have here as we go forward. Then ultimately, to round it all out, we want to expect and reward participation. As a cooperative, it only works if people join together. If people only take, I like to use this example, is if you're in a food cooperative and all you do is eat and you don't plant, the food cooperative doesn't last very long. And that's the same thing here, is we have planters and we have eaters at the credit union. We have planters, we have the savers, the depositors, and we have the eaters who borrow from us that pay back those savers and depositors. But expect and reward participation is pretty good. Now, during the financial crisis, to follow all 3 of those questions was incredibly difficult to do, but we did it. And with that, the investment that we made in that effort is what's led to our success that we're experiencing today. And then ultimately, The mission statement, which was in existence before the vision statement, was to provide exceptional experiences that build mutually beneficial relationships. Very simple concept, incredibly hard to do. Exceptional experiences means that it has to be more than just going over to Walmart and buying something. You get a mutually beneficial deal. You get a decent product for a fair price at Walmart, but do you get the service? Do you get the follow-up? If you have a question or a problem with the product, is there somebody there ready, willing, and able to help you? Maybe not. But at the credit union, we've found that's been a hallmark of our success as we've gone forward. I won't go into our values and our service promises, but by following some very basic, simple steps at the credit union, we've been able to execute on a consistent basis that many of our competitors have not been able to execute after. It's very, very simple. So our entire strategy, what's led to the credit union being one of the highest performing credit unions in the country, is based on this single page of information. It's hard to believe, and it's incredibly hard to execute, but when you do, it's incredibly powerful. So our strategic focus is member loyalty, and as we look at what our strategic drivers are, our long-term competitive advantage at the credit union is providing value, providing service at a level that others simply aren't providing. We'll see many of our competitors actually cutting back on their service levels, saying consumers don't want to be served by branches, don't want to be served by drive-ups, and every time they close a branch or a drive-up, our volumes increase considerably. Consumers still do want those services. They just want a fair price and good service when they have those. Our differentiating competitive advantage is what we look at as providing price and value that's better than most. So better than most is a lot different than best. But you can't have a price strategy and a service strategy. They conflict with each other. A service strategy is inherently a higher cost strategy. But if executed well and members believe in that, we've been able to create incomes that's been able to sustain the credit union at levels greater than those that are focusing on a low cost strategy going forward. We have three primary strategic objectives. External Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score is a way that we measure members' loyalty to the credit union. So we measure our members' loyalty, our staff members' loyalty to the credit union, and then overall our financial soundness as we go forward. So let's take a look at it. The other part with this is, in this very dynamic and changing world, you can't do a strategic plan saying we're going to do this 5 years from now. It just doesn't work. Things change. If you have an iPhone, do you have an iPhone, Murray? Okay, so if you have an iPhone, they're changing the software on that almost daily. I've got a new note on mine that it's behind and it keeps bugging me. I've got to do it. So it's changing so rapidly that the business world is changing that rapidly too. So what we look at is a guided hybrid approach. Management goes out and studies, does assessments of the market and so on, then brings back options for the board to choose for our strategies as we move forward. We also don't bet or invest in any one particular strategy. We bet and invest on capabilities. Capabilities to respond to market opportunities, capabilities to build defenses against other competitors, but not we're going to do X 3 years from now. We're going to be X capable 3 years from now based on what the opportunities provide. So, and just to give you a perspective of the process, the ongoing process for planning at the credit union, at the very top, you'll see we look at prior year's results. In March, our leadership group gets together and starts to scan what the opportunities and the challenges are in the environment. In April, we get together with our board. We talk about the basic things that we're thinking about doing, get their approval to go ahead and study and do assessments in the May and June timeframe. Then we take those assessments and we start kind of testing them against our managers in August and our executive leaders in September, so that we can start to put the final touches on our business plan, so that we present that to the board in November. And that just is an ongoing process that happens year after year, continual study, continual evolution of the service strategy that we've been faithfully executing for over 8 years now. And many of you know that people can't even keep ad campaigns more than a few months at a time, let alone following strategies more than a year at a time. And I think that's what's separated Rogue from others in the marketplace, is members have been able to count on us with a consistent service focus for the last 8 years. And in the near term, we don't see any changes in that strategy going forward. Okay, so I kind of like our results. The external net promoter score that we are shooting for is a 75, and we ended the year at 78 this last year. That's a 5-year goal, so we're ahead of schedule. We actually hit all 3 of our 5-year goals well in advance of what they were. Now, some might say that's poor goal setting on the CEO's part. I say that's reasonable goal setting and excellent execution on the CEO's part, right? Okay, maybe. Okay, so external NPS of 78. The best performing organizations in the country are at 80. Average for credit unions is at 60. So you can see there's considerable difference. Average for banks, what's the latest right now, Matt? Do you remember? 30s for the banks. So considerably better than that. Internal NPS is how do our employees feel about working here? Because if you want your members taken care of, you have to have employees that want to take care of your members. We actually received an 82 internal NPS score out of our goal of 80, which is a very good number. That's resulted in us being recognized as one of Oregon's top 100 best employers, including the #1 best employer in 2015 in the large nonprofit category. And then finally, net worth. What we've set is a long-term goal of 9.5%. We ended the year at 9.58%. So actually, in all ways, we're hitting on all 3 cylinders. Is that right? How many 3-cylinder engines? Anybody have a Geo Metro? That's the only 3-cylinder engine I know. I got Ben. Ben knows about Geo Metro. So anyway, so we're hitting on all cylinders at this point in time. Do you have a Geo? Yours is 3-cylinder. Okay. What's that? Oh, there we go. Don't have one of those. Is that a bike? Oh, car. Okay. There we go. So our strategic process, let's take a look at that. Rogue Credit Union has been named the Mail Tribune Reader's Choice Best Bank, which we don't like that bank term, but the best bank for 8 years in a row. And what was interesting is 8 years ago, prior to that, the credit union always worked to promote to our members and our staff about the Reader's Choice Poll Award. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to let our members figure it out and vote for us. And every year since we've stopped promoting the awards coming out, we've won it because our members have spoke up and said, we really think Rogue is the best out there. 100 best employers to work for, like we talked about already. We also have the deposit market share lead. So when you put us against U.S. Bank, Umpqua Bank, Chase Bank, every other bank in this market area, Rogue Credit Union has the highest deposit market share, actually considerably higher. When I first got here, we were at number 8. Now we're at number 1. And we also have the highest deposit market share in Curry County. That number is even higher percentage-wise. I want to say it's 40-some% or 38% total deposit market share held by the credit union. In lending, consumer lending, 4 of the 6 primary counties that we serve, we have market share leads. And sometimes those market share leads are by as much as 10% compared to others in the market. So, and I don't know if you remember the numbers off the top of your head. I think in Jackson County, we were at like 36 or 37%, and the closest was in the 20s. Doesn't just happen that way. So let's talk about it. We're one of the leading performers in Oregon from membership growth, deposit growth, asset growth, share growth, return on assets, and return on assets is income for the credit union. I thought I'd provide a little example here. This is Weiss Ratings. I was actually introduced to Weiss Ratings by a member of that came from the coast, and he wanted to know how we stacked up against everybody else out there. we have internal ratings that Tim will talk about a little bit later that our regulators rate us on. But this is an external independent group. And so they rate credit unions. And you can see on this chart that it goes all the way from A plus to E minus. And to me, it's scary when I look at this chart and see all the C pluses to E minuses that are out there in the nearly 6,000 credit unions across the country. Rogue Credit Union, as you can see in the upper corner here, is an A minus, which is one of the top rated credit unions in Oregon. And so if you look at that all the way over there to that group right there. The thing that I like about it is that it's what it says is our operating results have resulted in an excellent rating for profitability, 5-year analysis of stability costs, including evaluations of capital adequacy, asset growth, and profitability lead to an excellent overall stability index. This is an independent third party talking about Rogue Credit Union. Okay, so our future plans. What are we going to do? We got a lot of plans, lots of things going on. We're going to continue with our loyalty focus. We know that if we do the right thing for our members will support us in ways that they're actually moving at some of the highest rates in the country from other institutions to Rogue Credit Union right now. Not because we're enticing them in any way, it's because their friends and their family members are telling them to come to Rogue. In fact, 90% of all new members are referred by another member into the credit union. A 90% referral rate most marketers would die for a 90% referral rate. Usually you're talking 5 to 7% is a good referral rate. We're at 90%. Consumers are looking for an institution they can trust. They're looking for folks that they know if they put their money there, they get it back. That they don't have to worry about controversy, all of the things that go with it. And so with bank branch closures, we are seeing more demand for new branches. We currently have, we broke ground on 3 right now, and we've got 4 on the total of 6 branches under consideration right now. So right now we're working on the Central Point branch, the Grants Pass South branch, and the West Medford branch and West Roseburg branch. We also are trying, in fact, at our annual meeting, which I invite you to on March 21st, we'll leave directly from that meeting and go to Ashland for a city council meeting to work to get approval for our Ashland branch that we've been trying to get approval on in Ashland. And then what other ones are? Yeah, we're also looking in the Coos Bay market and maybe an additional spot in the Klamath Falls market, but those are not finalized. These guys haven't said yes yet. They let us purchase the property, but they haven't let us build the building or update the building, put the lipstick on one of the buildings that we need to put on that building. So with the branch closures, members are actually demanding more service. They're demanding more branches. They're demanding extended drive-up hours. They're demanding extended service hours. And they also still want technology, strong technology. We know we've been able to win by building a capable technology solution and providing the branches that members have when they need us, when they have questions, issues, or concerns, or want to buy that new boat that they really need. So, future plans. One of the things that is one of my mantras here is in the changing financial services landscape, being a small institution is incredibly difficult to do. And in fact, if you look at those WEIS ratings for small institutions, they're all in those yellow and red areas because it's much harder to compete as a small institution based on the regulations, the regulatory requirements. We went from one Shelley now to a department of, how many people are in your department now? 9 or soon to be 9? Soon to be 8. Yeah, 7, soon to be 9. Went from one audit compliance person to an entire department at vice president level just to keep up with the regulations that are ever changing each and every day. So big enough to matter, small enough to care. We know that if we reach out and return members or respond to members' letters that they send to us or return their calls or their emails, then we're still small enough to care. Let members know that we really do care about their concerns and their issues with the credit union. Finally, one of my favorite sayings is, If you take care of the member, everything else takes care of itself. You ever heard that before, Shelley? Almost every day. Okay. We know that this all works based on the fact that we take care of one member at a time and make them feel like the owners that they are. And then ultimately, we're going to focus on driving good profits as we go forward. Good profits. So many institutions are focusing on the bottom line and seeing that bottom line decrease. We focus on the front line, the member that's in front of us, and we see our profits increase by doing that. Okay, good. So with that, let me introduce former Chief George of the Medford City. Yeah. And the longest term board member at Rogue Credit Union, celebrating 25 years this year. Yes. Do you want to click or do you want me to click? You can click one.
Is this close enough for the guy back there? Will that work? Good. How's that? There we go. And remember that slide, and we'll talk about it later. We'll start, then we'll end it with that. But I am Tim George. I've been that's a camel, and I'm riding the camel. But we'll talk about a camel rating later. But I am Tim George. I've been a board member for 25 years. That means I started when I was 12. Okay? But in all seriousness, I want to thank the employees for being here. I am half Polish. My wife's maiden name is Pilikowski, so I am half Irish and half Polish. I'll let you folks figure out what that means. So I want to thank Murray for being here too. It means that you care. That's a good thing. But in the big scheme of things, what does a camel and a camel jockey have to do with being a rogue member? Go ahead, Gene, click it over there. It's not your grandparents' credit union anymore. In fact, we're in the Jim Johnston room right now, and that is Jim Johnston standing right there with his wife, Harriet, and that is the first credit union location, and it was the 800 block of Newtown Street. That house is still there. Some 60 years ago, Rogue got their start there. So there's some history down on Newtown Street, but a handful of teachers, how many? 6? Between 6 or 8 teachers put a little bit of money together to help each other, to help new teachers relocate to Medford, and that's really how the credit union got started. So there was a grassroots cooperative effort to help each other. So go ahead, Gene. Then when I was elected to the board back in 1992, it was less than a $100 million credit union. I can remember the first cake, Shay, that we had when we hit $100 million. It was a little tiny cake. Now we get big cakes. But you should celebrate those milestones that you hit. But I do remember that because that was a big deal when you hit 100 million, because we were in the big leagues now. We had some assets. We had some clout. People didn't just think that Medford was a place that people stopped to go to the restroom on the way to Disneyland. We put Medford on the map, so to speak. But I did get elected. It was a contested election. That was odd then, but I did run for election. I did it. The loyalty filter was there at that time too for me, because Rogue loaned me money, but I didn't have any money. So I felt that I owed Rogue something because they believed in me, number one. And number two, there was a benefit for me because I had just been promoted to sergeant, and in the police business, that's the first step in the administrative management part of it. And it's really been a 25-year master level course in finance for me to be part of Rogue's board. So they have trained me, raised me, and a lot of mentors along the way. Vern Arnold was the CEO when I first became a board member, and then that's when the training started for me. Not only was there board training and continued training, but Vern took me into his office once a month for a 4-hour special training for me because I didn't know the jargon. I didn't know a camel rating from a camel jockey, and there were a lot of things that Vern had to teach me. We got in Vern's truck and drove around to all the branches, and he introduced me and really mentored me, and I can't thank Vern Arnold enough. That's for darn sure. But go ahead, Gene. Now, here we are, February 2017, Rogue's a $1.3 billion credit union serving 5 counties. Go ahead, Gene. That's just for a sec, that is I think a rendition from Central Point's new branch they just broke ground on, so that's an architectural rendering of what it's going to look like there. But now the board member role is much more comprehensive, more complicated than it was back then. Certainly Um, 17 branches. You'll see it next, but there's 110,000 members, 500 plus employees, 17 branches, and 12 communities. It's a large financial institution now, and it requires a lot more work on the part of the board and a part of the supervisory committee and everybody else involved in that to make this thing move. And it does move. And Matt can tell you it moves at a rapid pace. And you can see that in the faces of everybody that works at Rogue, that how fast this moves and how much effort they're putting into it on a daily basis. But on the plus side, what the board is responsible for, we oversee and advocate in those following areas. Regulations, both state and federal. There's risk management issues, information technology, and a regional economic strategy. I think you have to be aware of what's going on around you and how we compare and compete in this marketplace. That's constantly something that's on the board's mind, where we're going and how we're going. But it's long term. We're not micromanaging. We hired Gene, and Gene spoke earlier. He's really the only employee of the board, and really Jerry's the person that has his ear, because we speak as one through Jerry to Gene, and that's really the way it should be. We're not telling Gene or Matt or anybody else in this room how to run the credit union, because that's their job. So the board's position is at the 5,000 foot level. Go ahead. But the minimum requirements to be a board member, of course, you got to be a Rogue Credit Union member. That would be a good thing. You got to be at least 18 years of age and eligible to vote at Rogue. So you'd have to be a shareholder or have an account, I guess is the best way to describe it. You got to agree to the Rogue Ethics Agreement, piece of paper that you sign, an ethical agreement that you're going to do the right thing for the right reason. Go ahead. I got to catch up. There's a bonding requirement. You're going to have to be able to be bonded. You can't be employed by the credit union or its subsidiaries for the last 2 years, and you can't have any immediate family members that are employed by Rogue. So yes, Matt, you are not eligible to be a board member. I'm sorry to break the news to you. You can't. There'd be a vetting process. That's for darn sure. That's right. Go ahead. But the responsibility, we do have a fiduciary responsibility. There is liability on the part of board members, although we are insured through the credit union as board members. Still, if you were to do something that is over and above what an ordinary person and prudent person would do at that time, that you could be held liable for that. And there's a certain standard of conduct that you're expected to adhere to, too, as far as your performance as a board member. And so those are things that are certainly our responsibility and the responsibility of the board to make sure that everybody's acting in that fashion. Go ahead. The conflict of interest notification, you certainly have to bring that to the attention of the board anytime there would be any kind of decision that would be in conflict. A prudent person and their standard of care to make sure you're not doing anything intentional or above and beyond what a prudent and standard care, I guess, requirement would be. I guess that's the best way to describe that. The expectation really is what's best for Rogue as well as what's best for the members, and Gene spoke to it. If you take care of those members, the rest of it all falls into place. Go ahead, Gene. Yeah, the ideal characteristics of a board member, you don't want 7 Tim Georges on the board, although that would be kind of cool for just a few minutes. So we could take a few photos. It's certainly not something that you want to deal with, because you only need one of me, because I only bring a certain skill set to the table. Murray, do you have the guide? We should have handed that out to you. It's the candidate's guide and our group, especially with the folks that were in the board governance committee, helped compile this. It's going to list the ideal characteristics that we're looking for, because everybody brings a certain skill set to the table, and it shouldn't be easy to be a board member. I think that's something that has to be said, because it requires effort, it requires substantial work, and there is complexity to it, and you're looking for a broad base of knowledge, skills, and abilities from a wide variety of folks. So our 7 board members all come from a different area that bring a different skill set to the table, and I think that's huge. And when you look at pages 6, 7, and 8, Murray, you'll see in item C there the ideal skills and people that come from the area of finance, which is where Philip came from, and I'm going to introduce Philip in a minute. People that come from the human resources area, the management leadership area. There's community involvement we're looking for. We're looking for people that have experience in cooperatives, people that have experience in community development and are involved in social inclusion efforts. And you're also looking for, in a broader base, you're looking for gender balance. You're looking for ethnic and cultural diversity, and what we strive for also is the diversity of age and life stage. So you're looking for all that. In an ideal world, you would have that. But essentially, and I'll use my police jargon here for a minute, a police department should represent the community that it serves. And if you have a 14% Latino population, then you should have a portion of the police department should have some Latinos working there, because that gives you credibility in that community. And the same for Rogue, it should represent the communities and the people that it serves. So you want to have people from Douglas County on our board. You want to have people from the South Coast on our board. You're going to have males on our board, females on our board. You're going to have, hopefully someday, a Latino member on our board. So you can see the diversity is going to give us not only credibility amongst the membership, but it is going to represent what Rogue represents, and it should represent the people that it serves. Go ahead. I won't go into too much more detail, Murray, because pages 6, 7, 8 are pretty thick with information. So in the absence of time here, we'll move forward. But it's all about competencies. Let's talk about time commitment for a minute, because I think some people may not be fully aware of how much time it takes to actually serve on this board. It varies from month to month, but we're averaging about 20 to 30 hours a month is the expected average, but that's climbing. And just for me alone in the month of February, I'm going to hit the 40-hour mark plus, because we're going to go to a GAC training event. There's going to be travel involved in that. Combined for the first 2 months of 2017, I'm going to be at roughly the 40-hour mark. And I'm sure other members in here would back me up on that as well. So there's going to be at least one full board meeting a month. You're going to be on maybe 2 committee meetings during that month. You're going to have other public events or things that you're going to at least be asked or encouraged to attend. So again, the size and complexity of Rogue, the expectation, the time commitment is going to grow as well. And conferences and other related work, and I think I spoke to that earlier, but that's going to expand as well, because as the complexity of this organization grows, we're going to have more expertise as a board as well. And fortunate to be in a board setting, in a situation here where training and education is a priority, and that's a good thing. Let's move on to the election process now, because people that are coming to this hopefully are interested in being a board member, but there's only one person in this room that can be. Yearly, 2 to 3 board members come up for election. There's a nominating committee that's assigned by the chair, and it's tasked with identifying qualified candidates. The nominating committee actually can go out and seek candidates. We have done that. And the nominating committee may actively recruit. And go ahead, Gene. They bring these, whoops. There we go. They bring a slate of qualified candidates forward to the full board for their review and approval. The board has some options here. They can approve our slate, they can remove some of them, or they can add some of them. And then, go ahead, Gene. The board approves the candidates not moved forward. There could be folks that applied and did not get moved forward by the nominating committee. They still have an option. They can petition, and that's in page 11, Murray, of that handout as well. But you need 500 signatures of members 75 days prior, and submitting that to the nominating committee for consideration as well. Go ahead. This year, our annual meeting is on March 21st, 2007, but I didn't spell that, Gene did. 2017. That was one too many 2 a.m. texts, I think. So the notice to the members, you got to notice to the members 45 days prior that we're having an annual meeting. If again, Gene explained to you, contested elections, it's 1 member, 1 vote. It doesn't matter how much you have invested in this credit union or your assets. It's 1 member, 1 vote, and there are no nominations from the floor. Alrighty, and again, we're back to the camera thing, and there the regulators and examiners examine banks and credit unions use a CAMEL rating, and I'm going to quiz these people for a minute. So the C stands for capital, the A stands for assets. I'm going to go to the experts here. The M stands for management, the E stands for earnings, and the L stands for liabilities. So that is what it is scored on, and you're not supposed to publicly talk about your CAMEL rating because that's part of the process, but I can tell you this, that Rogue Credit Union has some of the highest CAMEL ratings in the business because this is a sound, well-run organization with outstanding employees, a strong board, and a loyalty focus that is second to none. So that's it for me as far as a summary of the board process and the expectations there and the training. And I'm going to introduce to you now Philip Smith, who is one of the smarter guys on the board because he comes from an accounting background. He knows the language. He's a former professor at Southern Oregon University. He also worked for Deloitte and Touche Accounting, if I pronounced that correctly. He is currently the treasurer of the Rogue Credit Union Board, and he also is a experienced developer in the construction business. And here is Philip Smith.
So I've been a CPA for 15 years, kind of bring the financial background to the board and supervisory committee. So initially, I decided in 2009 when the building industry wasn't going that strongly, I had some extra time on my hand that I wanted to serve on the board, and so I became interested and I applied to be on the board at that time. And in 2009, I was not chosen to even be moved forward on the board, and Jerry talked to me. And at the time, I was also a professor of accounting at SOU, and Jerry asked me if I would be interested in serving on the supervisory committee, which is kind of like our audit committee. And since I'd worked on financial institutions, when I worked at Deloitte & Touche, I worked on almost every Oregon-based bank and no credit unions. But I understood how banks worked and how they earned money and how they were regulated. I had dealt a lot with the regulators, and so I felt like I should take my experience that I'd earned or learned while I was at Deloitte & Touche and apply it. And since I was a member here, I decided I wanted to use that knowledge to help Rogue as I could. And I served on the supervisory committee for a total of 4 years. The second year I was on the supervisory committee, I applied once again to be on the board, and the board elected to move my application forward, and I was part of an election, I think one of the last elections we've had, contested elections we've had, and I was not elected. To the best of this room's knowledge, the last person to be elected in a contested election was Tim George. That an incumbent lost. So then that is a cake, yeah. In the history of Rogue, except for Tim George, the incumbent has always been elected in elections. So I spent some time learning Rogue and by serving on the supervisory committee and getting to know the board before I was even moved forward as a candidate. As it turns out, in 2012, one of the board members elected to move to Portland, and there was a spot, and they needed to fill the spot. And because I'd served on the supervisory committee at that point for 3 years, and they were looking for a financial background, I was appointed to the board at that point. And then I've been elected, I think, twice since. When I move forward, kind of went over a lot of that. The one thing we haven't talked about is elections are fairly expensive. They're $20,000 to $40,000 to conduct on a contested election. So it's not that we don't do them, but we generally, ask for nominations. And if we have a spot available or we're looking for a need, if we have an unmet need and we have more qualified applicants, and the nominating committee feels that we should put that slate out to the membership, then that is what we do. It should be noted that, unlike a lot of not-for-profits, the credit union is heavily regulated, and our regulators aren't necessarily interested in having a lack of continuity in the board. They would like to have consistent leadership on the board, and because they are insuring $1.3 billion in assets, they want to make sure that the board is qualified. That is definitely one thing. Even since when I first started coming to supervisory committee meetings in 2009, the regulators have continued to increase the expectations of the level of education and engagement of board members and understanding of financial statements especially. I know our board packet from even in the time that I've been involved is probably twice as long, and from everyone who's talking, it's 4 times as long as, say, 15 years ago. And a lot of that's driven by regulation, and I think sometimes people don't understand that about serving on a cooperative board, that this one's highly regulated, unlike some. Yes, I have no doubt if we continue to grow beyond $1.3 billion, which we probably will, because our members like us so much that the board, in every year when our regulators come to examine us, we get new specialists to help us better understand the regulation that the regulators bring in, which makes the process that much harder as we continue to grow. The regulators have higher expectations of both Gene, management, and the board. One other thing that I often get questions in the community is, why aren't deposit rates higher or loan rates lower? And the thing is we represent everybody. We try to represent our 110,000, now I think 111,000 members. And that's a vast age range, a vast geographical range, different backgrounds. So when we, as a board, act, we try to think of the 111,000 members that we currently represent and a balance between both the depositors, the savers, and the people who want to borrow money, and how we can have the most benefit for our members as a whole. We also serve diverse communities. The needs of the people on the coast are different than the needs of the people in Medford. The people in Ashland have different needs in Medford, and Roseburg, once again, different time of fall. So we have this vast geographic area that, as our members have continued to like us even more and have asked for more branches and more geographical expansion, we've continued to fill that desire. Another thing, and I think every board member, without exception, is very involved in the community. I serve on several other boards, and am also on several other finance committees. And also, I have 50 employees of my own. I run a reasonably sized company and have a feel for what the housing and development market here in the Jackson County area is. And that's one of my expertise, and that's what I bring in. Chief George brings an idea of law enforcement and city, and a lot of connections gained over the years of being part of the city of Medford. And Coach, with his long time in Ashland, has a lot of community connections in Ashland and has a feel for the community, and so does Liz Shelby. And Cheryl, who's from the South Coast, has a good idea of a feel for that community on the coast with our branches. So we all have this community connection and try to have an idea of what's going on in our community that affects our members. And as a board, and Gene doesn't always see this because he's not part of all of our meetings, but we definitely debate and don't always agree initially, but once we have a voice, we support the decision. So it's unlike all the other boards I'm part of, this board is fairly, we have to be engaged, and our regulators certainly expect a high level of engagement. One more? Is that you? Or? All right, well, back to Jerry. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. As Philip said, and as we've said all along, there are a number of things I think that are so important to us as a board, and that is our first concern is every decision that we make, how does it affect our members? Not what is it something we want to do personally or whatever else. Personal goals are not there, and as Philip said, we have some discussions, and there's some disagreement, but when we're through, we really push forward, and we don't have 6 people supporting and one saying, well, they voted on that, but this is what I want to do. We do not do that as a board, and a good board can't do that. We're so proud of what we've accomplished over the period of time where we've been here, and I think that's really, and it is a diverse board. We have a variety, and like Philip did it so well of the communities we have to serve, you have to think of all of those people. Because if you come in with an agenda, you won't last long. Because I tell you, one thing that we do I think is better than any board I've ever been involved with is we do annual evaluations of ourselves and of each other. We do a peer evaluation where we evaluate each other, and then I sit down with each board member, that's the chair or whoever the chair would be, and they go over their evaluation with them each year. And I think that has made us, when we started that process, it has made us a much stronger board as a result. It really has. We've all grown from it. We all have things we can learn to improve. Okay, we want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest. And, of course, you have a copy of the candidates guide. I think that's important to go through that and really study that because it really does a good job of laying out everything that we've had to say here today. An application form, we have a blank form over here on the side you're welcome to pick up, but you must complete the application form online. They will not take a written application form. It must be completed online. Because we are so technology-based, we really have to have proof that you have the ability to use the technology. The nomination by petition, like Chief said, there is that process there. You have to get 500 members. Some people have said, well, that's very difficult to do. Well, it should be difficult to do. And if you can get that, then you have a right to come forward, because we have a nomination process. We have a committee that goes through, does this evaluating, and really researches well. And Chief George, when he was a nominating committee chair years ago, set up a great handbook that we can follow. And everybody can follow the process, and it really makes it a good thing. Our bylaws are such that we allows for elections, allows for open elections. But as Philip said, is it a good use sometimes of our members' money to spend $40,000 if we have two of our best board members are running against, and if we have somebody that's qualified, trust me, they'll be put up against them. But we really want to consider the use of those funds and how they're being spent in that regards. If you're interested, contact Peggy Blair in the office. She'll give you all the other information you need to have. And there's your phone number right there.